Alright, so now we're taking a look at the Tiny Whoop power connectors. If you didn't watch my previous video where I converted over from the JST 1.25 to the Power Whoop connector, go ahead and check that out. That'll get you caught up to speed. But now we need to swap over the connector that goes to the Whoop so that we can plug in the newer style connector that is bigger. Pretty easy. We're just going to run through it real quick. I'm going to have to take everything off. That's no big deal. Just take the canopy off. Now, I would not recommend you try and do the conversion without taking the board completely out of the frame. That's just a bad idea. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to unplug the motors here also. You're just asking for trouble if you're trying to put a hot soldering iron inside this super delicate close quarters plastic frame. Something will melt. So we're just going to quickly unplug our motors and then get the board the rest of the way out. And again, this is definitely an upgrade. If you have the connector that comes with the flight controller, this is what came with its stock, but this also came in the same box. If you do have the ability to convert over or to swap from the smaller to the bigger connector, it is definitely worth the time. It's kind of ridiculous to buy batteries that have the smaller connector because you're just bottlenecking the amount of power that you're going to get out of your Whoop. Alright, so now we've got all those screws off, and now we're just going to gently tug at the board. Alright, so now the frame and the motors and everything are over there. And now again, we're just going to take a close look at the connectors. Now this is actually a pretty cruddy solder job coming from the factory, so we'll clean that up, but we just need to remember that the ground wire is closest to the USB. And this is the BETAFPV FRSky long range board without an OSD. So I don't know, there's some other BETAFPV boards, they might have different polarity, so just be careful that you have this exact same board as me if you're going to follow these directions exactly. So yeah, ground is closest to USB. So we're just going to go ahead and pull these off. Let's do the blue tack. This is an amazing little trick if you've never seen it. You just put some blue tack down and then jam the board into it and it holds tight. Let's move that so you can see it a little better. Right about there. All right. And so now we're just going to heat up that ground terminal and pop it loose. Same thing with the positive. Now there is a chip right next to the positive, so just be careful. You don't want to be getting your tip on any of those pins in the circuit board. I think my soldering iron needs to heat up a little bit more. All right, here we go. This one's not wanting to come off. Let's see here. I did solder the FPV camera to the same battery terminals on the backside, so I do have a larger volume of solder on the positive side, so that might be why it just might take a little bit longer to heat up. Man, what's going on here? It's getting plenty hot. These things always happen. I think, oh, this will just be a real quick fix, and then I get into it, and it turns out to be a little bit more difficult. So let's try, since the I don't want to put too much heat into it, let's just try and pulling these pins off. There we go. Let's get the camera out of the way. I wouldn't think you'd need to do this, but I just want to be careful not overheat the board too much. Okay, yeah, I think that was it. All right, so we'll flip it back over and heat this side back up again. Oh my goodness. What's going on here? Maybe I'll heat it up from this side and pull it from the other side. Let's give that a shot. Goodness, what is going on? It's so hot that it hurts my finger to hold. I'm trying to see. I guess it went through. It might be going through the board and like bending over or something. The solder is a little bit ridiculous. Well, let's see here. I've never had that problem before. It's just like not wanting to come loose. Let's add some flux and see if we can get it to flow a little bit more. I have had some issues with some solder from some of the Chinese boards and stuff. Whenever you try to desolder or solder something on top, they use a really high temperature solder, and I use a relatively, I mean, it's not low temp, but it's definitely not as high as I think what these guys are using. So it might just be the fact that this solder is, there we go. My gosh. Okay, so combination of adding flux and heating up my soldering iron, and then just putting an extra solder just to heat up the entire area, broke it loose. And I think that's the case, is that they're using a higher temperature solder than what I am. So that was a little bit more difficult than what I was expecting. I guess I should expect super high temp solder from anything that is Chinese. All right. So let's see here. We'll just keep the same length on these wires, and we'll just go ahead and strip these. Might not even need those. Let's do, yeah. Cool. So again, I don't want super long exposed wires. I want just enough that the pad, basically the length of the pad is the amount of exposed wire that I want. We'll tin these up real quick. All right, that looks good. And remember, the pad closest to the USB was ground. I'm trying to think. I think it was, yeah, they were soldered in similar to that as far as orientation. These wires are different lengths. The black's a little bit longer than the red. Does that bother me? We'll just roll with it. I think it'll be fine. It shouldn't really hurt anything too bad. So we'll get this ground wire down first. Come on now. Goodness. It's not want to stay put, so I'll just add a little bit more flux in there to help the solder flow between the wire itself and the pad. Perfect. All right, so I call that good. Sorry, I'm a little bit weird about solder. I really want to make sure every solder connection is just about perfect. So I take my time on these. And on this one, just again, because there's that circuit chip right there, just be really cautious not to touch any of the legs on it. All right, cool. Let's get any of that excess blue tack off. All right, so there are the solder joints for the power loop connector. Now real quick, quick sanity check. We'll plug it in before we put it all back in to make sure that it's all working. And again, just make sure the red on the battery, red on the battery terminal is matching up with the red going into the board. Perfect. Everything's working and powering up. No smoke, so we're good to go. All right, so now we're just gonna throw this back into the frame. I guess, well, yeah. I don't have to do all that in the live stream because y'all probably don't want to see it go all back together, but I'm going to solder the camera back in and then just reassemble it, doing the opposite of what I did to take it apart. But that is how you put in a Power Whoop 2.0, JST 2.0 cable onto your Whoop, and we'll do some power tests here in a little bit where I'm going to actually compare the power output of these two connectors. So check out that video here in a second, and we'll get rolling. Any comments? Come on, guys, you gotta put some comments so I can talk to them at the end of the videos. All right, I'll see you in a little bit.